Now, what I have already determined is that the leak is from the discharge line, which oddly enough, and makes the job a little easier for me, is right in the front of the engine. So I can actually reach through the grill, and that discharge line, there's going to be two bolts that are holding it on essentially to the front of the radiator. And I'm going to remove that line, put on a new one, and then I'll show you how to pull vacuum, get your system prepared to load a fresh load of R134 into it. So let's get started. If we zoom in on the front of the car, what you can see tucked behind the grill is that odd black shaped tube. That is actually the discharge line that we need to remove. Now, if we look through the lower open section of the grill, you can see more of that line, and I think you can kind of get a good view. That bolt right there, that little bolt right there, that is the first one that we need to remove. Now, in order to get to the second bolt, we will have to remove this dust shield on the bottom of the car. Again, this is the front of the car. And there's just a few quick clips that we'll need to unfasten. So I'm just using a flathead screwdriver. I'm just popping out these trim connectors. Here's the dust cover I removed. And again, there's gonna be 10 or so trim clips. I just want to point out that don't forget there is a trim clip up in the wheel well on each side, as well as underneath the front. There's going to be two pieces of plastic that go up under the frame and clip on. So remember, those are there. Don't start jerking on it before you get those out, or you might break something. Now that we have that dust cover bottom trim piece removed, you can see the other nut that's holding on the other end of that line. We're gonna need a 10 millimeter deep socket to remove that nut. All right, the last thing I wanna do is have any of these bolts snap, so I am adding a little PV blaster. Now, before I remove that discharge line in the front of the car, I do wanna make sure that the system is empty. So I have hung up my manifold by the hood release. Now I'll show you on the low pressure side the way this valve works. So you're gonna spin it in order to be closed, you actually wanna have this valve up all the way. So closed is actually counterclockwise to get it up. That way it won't be pushing on the Schrader valve when you install it. Once you spin it all the way counterclockwise so that it's technically closed, next, what you can do is you'll see this is a quick connect. So you're gonna set this on your low pressure side with that quick release. And now it's on there. Now do the same thing on the high side, and then we'll open them. Once you're connected, you can slowly open or push down on that Schrader valve. And if you open it all the way, and you're not getting any pressure on your low side or your high side, be sure to hook both up, then you know the system is empty and you can go ahead and remove that hose in the front of the car. Reaching through the grill and using a large wrench and a 10 millimeter shallow socket, I am now loosening the bolt holding that front end of the line on. This bolt was really hard to get out the entire way, which should have been an immediate red flag. And I did use a large wrench through the grill with a short 10 millimeter socket to get that first bolt out. Once you have the 10 millimeter bolt removed, you can go under the car and get the second end disattached. And again, that is also 10 millimeter. You're gonna wanna use a deep socket. Again, using that 10 millimeter deep socket along with an extension made it pretty easy to get after this end of the discharge line. Again, I'm going in through the bottom of the front of the car where I removed the dust shield. And just to be clear, the discharge line end that you're removing from the bottom of the car, that is not a bolt, it is a nut. And this is the one I just removed. All right, so there it is without the nut. And we're just trying to finagle it down. There we go. All right, our discharge line is now disconnected at both ends. I'm gonna fish it out through the grill to remove it. Now I am kind of getting a crazy glare, but I just wanna make a point that pay attention to the orientation of this discharge line, because you're gonna wanna install the new one the same way you removed the old one, and just so all of the ends line up properly. It's a little awkward, but with both ends disconnected, I was able to fish that through the grill on the front in order to get it out. And again, I'm going to install the new one, just reversing the process. There we go. There is the old one. Let's do a quick inspection of the parts just to make sure they are a match. And they do look good. So now the same way I removed it, I'm going to install the new discharge line. I'm going to leave these caps on too, just to protect and keep the ends clean. I did make the poor decision to reuse that beat up bolt from the front. Here you can see I got the nut back on pretty easily, again using that deep socket underneath. In the front, I'm using a socket wrench and a 10mm shallow socket just to get that bolt snug before I introduce the torque wrench. You want to torque the bolt and the nut both to 16 foot-pounds. For some strange reason, it's taken me a while to get to the 16 foot-pounds of torque. As luck would have it, while I was setting the torque to 16 foot-pounds, the bolt actually snapped. I had to work pretty hard while removing it, so I probably should have thought that this was going to happen. But I did find the replacement bolt. It's an M6 1x35mm hex head, so I am going to get that reinstalled again. Now I did remove the front grille, and what I did was I removed all these clips, trim clips, and then I reached through the bottom and was able to actually get at all the bottom ones. So without removing the bumper, I was able to pull that grill off. Here you can get a better look at where I'm going to be attaching that discharge line. So let's try that again now. I will also mention that because I was only setting the torque to 16 foot-pounds, the snapped off bolt, I was actually able to grab onto the end of it with a vice grips and twist it out. So I was pretty thankful that it didn't turn into a bigger project. With the new discharge line installed and tightened to 16 foot-pounds, we are now ready to pull vacuum on the system. So I've got my manifold hung from the hood latch, and I have already connected the quick connects, and I have them all backed off right now, and the high side is also connected. And now I'm ready to hook up my yellow line to the vacuum pump. All right, so I've threaded on the line to the vacuum pump, and everything, all these fittings are finger tight. And now what I want to do is I want to open all of these valves. So I'm turning the dial so that it pushes down on these Schrader valves, and we'll get both the high and low side open. And on the manifold, you want to crank them counterclockwise. This one's already open, to get all of the lines open. All right, so at this point, we are now ready to turn on our vacuum. Now flip on the vacuum pump and pull vacuum. And as you can see, our vacuum is dropping. A little bit of pump oil leaking out of there. And so what we're gonna do is we're just gonna pull vacuum for about 20 to 40 minutes just to get all of the water vapor out of the system. It was open for a little while. Like I said, I did have to run to the hardware store to get those new bolts, so it's a pretty humid day. So I'm gonna let this go for like 20 to 40 minutes. All right, so we're at about 40 minutes, so I'm gonna turn the pump off. And let's take a look at what our vacuum reading is. And I'm just gonna wait about 15 minutes and see how it looks. Now again, one thing to keep in mind is this test is gonna tell you how good the vacuum is in your system, but it is heavily reliant on the fact that you have all tight connections. There's a lot of connections to the vacuum pump, the manifold, and even the connections to the high and low side itself. So hopefully you've got all tight fittings so that you're truly testing the integrity of your air conditioning system. All right, so it's been about 20 minutes and the vacuum system is holding pretty tight. I'm pretty happy with that. So what we're gonna do next is fill the system. Here I'm just putting some Teflon tape on the fixture that actually punctures the R134 can. Again, I just want tight fittings on everything for this process. Now you're gonna unscrew the yellow line from your vacuum pump, and that is what you are going to thread on to that fixture that attaches to the R134 can. Make sure the needle on this fixture is up all the way so that you're not puncturing the can while you're screwing it on. And we're now getting ready to fill our system. Now before you start your car, get the can stable and also look into the engine compartment and make sure that there's no lines near the fan or the belts. Give your car a couple of minutes to warm up and then turn your air conditioning on full blast. Now you are going to open all of the valves on the car as well as the manifold except for the high pressure side. Do not open the manifold high pressure red valve. Now open the valve on your R134 and we will be filling the first can, which is 12 ounces. You're going to use a total of 3, but you're only going to use about 2.5 ounces from that third can. As that can is emptying, two things are going to happen. One, you're going to feel it actually getting lighter and lighter as it empties. But the second thing is that the can is going to get very cold, and that's just due to the expansion properties of the 134. Now, what I'm going to do shortly is go get a bucket of water. I'm not getting hot water, but I'm just getting some water that I can set this can in because when it gets ice cold, the pressure will drop. So I just want to put it in water in order to force all of that R134 out and not allow the outside of the can to get ice cold.
So at this point, just be patient. That can will get lighter and lighter, and as you can see, it'll actually start to float in the water when it's just about empty. Once that can is empty and it's no longer cold, you can close the manifold valve to the low side. Then you can disconnect that can and hook up a new can. Now I'm actually going to be putting in the PAG 46 oil in between the first and second can. And I'm doing this because I do believe when this line was leaking, I probably lost some of my lubricant. So I'm just going to put about 3 ounces into my system. Once I get this small can in, which will only take a few minutes, then I will go on to the second can of R134. Now that I've introduced the 3 ounces of lubricant, I am again closing that low side blue manifold valve, unscrewing the can, and again I'm going to set up the second can now of R134. Once I've punctured that second can of R134, then I will open the blue low pressure side manifold valve to fill that second 12 ounces into the AC system. And just like with the first can, I'm just setting it in the water so that it kind of keeps it from getting too cold, and I'm just going to let it drain into the system. And I'll check it and shake it up once in a while just to keep it moving around. Now it's not easy to nail down specific pressures you want to see on the high side and low side, but what I'm basically seeing on today is about 30 on the low side and about 150 on the high side. After putting in 26.5 ounces, regardless of where the pressure lands, that's about where I'm going to stop. At this point, I'm hooking up the third can, but I'm just going to hold it because I'm going to judge it by weight. After I've added about a couple of ounces and I feel it getting lighter, I'm going to stop and pack it up. At this point, I'm pretty happy with where I'm at, so I am going to release the puncture because this is a self-sealing can, and I'll close off the manifold. Next, I'm going to turn the gate valves on the car, on the high side and low side, counterclockwise to release any pressure on that Schrader valve before I disconnect them. Once the gate valves on the high and low side are essentially closed, then I will open the manifold gate valves just to relieve any pressure that's inside the manifold before I start putting everything away. Now I removed the gate valves from the high and low side while the car was running. I'd probably suggest turning the car off because there is a fan running and you've got belts going, especially if your air conditioner is still on. So it's probably safest to disconnect all these lines with the car turned off. with all of your lines disconnected, you can now get that manifold out of the way. Your air conditioner has been filled. You probably have nice cold air now running out of your air conditioner, and we can do a final inspection of everything. Put those high side caps and low side caps back on. And now let's get inside the car and check how cool the air is. Based on the look on this gentleman's face, he looks pretty happy with where things are at. Now, with the system tested and no observable leaks, I'm ready to put the grill back on, and I'm just going to do that by sliding it into place and then adding all those trim clips on the top as well as underneath in order to get it secured. And the last thing to do is to get under the car and put that lower dust shield back on and insert all the trim clips that were used to hold it in place. Once you do that, your car is all back together.
All right, this project is completed. Other than snapping that M6 bolt on the front radiator, it went fairly smoothly. Took the 3 cans of R134. I did reintroduce some new PAG oil into the system. I tested it. It's got very cold air, so all things look good so far. I did pull a vacuum for a good 30 minutes just to make sure, or I should correct myself. I pulled vacuum for 40 minutes and then I just closed all the valves, turned the vacuum pump off, and let it sit for about a half an hour just to make sure that the system actually held the vacuum. So good news is, other than that line, that was the only thing wrong with the system. So we should be in good shape. This 2007 Honda Pilot should have a solid AC system for hopefully a couple of years at least. And that's thanks for watching. Check out the description for more information and hit that subscribe button if you'd like to see more videos.